You know what? Let me tell you something about humans. When I first got assigned to the Galactic Council's peacekeeping division, my supervisor, a four-armed Vorthan named Commander Greeks, pulled me aside and said, "Zara, whatever you do, don't mess with the humans." Did I listen? Of course not. I'm Zelthari. We're known for our superior intellect, not our listening skills. My name is Captain Zara Velthork, and I used to think I was pretty hot stuff. 3 meters tall, purple-scaled, with enough military decorations to make a Rigelian peacock jealous. I commanded the patrol cruiser Stellar Harmony. Yeah, I know, terrible name, and my crew respected me. Well, they feared me, but in the military that's basically the same thing. The day everything went sideways started like any other routine patrol through Sector 7. My communications officer, a nervous little Blixian named Pip, was monitoring the usual chatter. Trade disputes, minor territorial squabbles, the occasional drunk Centaurian trying to hug a space whale. Nothing we couldn't handle with a stern warning and maybe a fine. "Captain," Pip's voice cracked like a pubescent teenager, "we're receiving a distress signal from the human colony on Kepler 442 billion. I almost choked on my morning stimulant drink. Humans? In our sector. That was like finding a plasma grenade in your lunchbox, technically possible, but highly concerning. "Put it through," I ordered, trying to sound more confident than I felt. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a middle-aged human woman with dirt-streaked face and tears streaming down her cheeks. Behind her, I could see smoke rising from what looked like residential buildings. "This is Mayor Elena Santos of New Terra Colony," she said, her voice shaking. "We need immediate assistance. There's been an incident with one of your patrol officers." An incident. My scales prickled with unease. The Galactic Council had very strict protocols about human interactions. Rule number 1, don't engage unless absolutely necessary. Rule number 2, if you must engage, be polite. Rule number 3, if you can't be polite, run. "What kind of incident?" I asked, though part of me already knew I wasn't going to like the answer. Mayor Santos took a shuddering breath. Officer Krex Thullian of the Drakmori security force struck and killed an 8-year-old human child during what he called a routine enforcement action. The bridge went dead silent. Even the ship's environmental systems seemed to hold their breath. I felt my secondary heart skip a beat, the one we Zelthari use for processing extreme stress. "Explain," I managed to croak out. Little Marcus Webb was playing in the market square with his friends. They were being loud, as children do. Officer Thullian deemed their behavior disruptive to civil order and demanded they disperse. When Marcus didn't understand the Galactic Standard commands, "He's only 8, Captain." Thullian used his enforcement baton. My blood turned to ice. Enforcement batons were designed for adult, non-human species, on a human child, especially one from a high-gravity world like Earth. The boy died instantly, Santos continued, her composure cracking. His mother, Sarah Webb, tried to approach her son's body. Thullian called it interference with official duties and struck her as well. "She's in our medical facility now, fighting for her life." I closed my eyes and counted to 10 in ancient Zelthari. Then I counted to 20. Then I gave up and started swearing in languages that hadn't been spoken for millennia. "Captain?" Pip's voice was barely a whisper. "Set course for Kepler 442 billion maximum speed," I ordered, "and send word to command that we have a Code Black situation." Code Black. The designation reserved for incidents that could trigger interspecies war. The last time someone had called a Code Black, the hegemony of Zorax had accidentally obliterated a Terran research station, and the humans had responded by turning the Zorax homeworld into a parking lot. Diplomatically speaking, of course. My tactical officer, a perpetually grumpy Corvan named Blex, looked up from his console. "Captain, we're receiving additional transmissions from the human colony. Multiple frequencies, high encryption. Nature of the transmissions?" Blex's mandibles clicked nervously. "They appear to be calling for help. From us? No, Captain. From other humans. That's when I knew we were really in trouble. Humans had this adorable little quirk. When one of them was threatened, they all became personally invested in the situation. It was like poking a nest of Arcturian fire wasps, except the wasps had nuclear weapons and a really long memory. The trip to Kepler 442 billion took 6 hours at maximum burn. 6 hours of increasingly frantic communications from Galactic Command, asking for updates I didn't have and answers I couldn't give. 6 hours of watching my crew slowly realize that we might be flying into the middle of the galaxy's next great catastrophe. When we finally arrived in the Kepler system, I understood why Commander Grix had warned me about humans. The first thing I saw was the Earth Defense Force flotilla. 3 heavy cruisers, a dozen destroyers, and enough support craft to invade a small moon. They were positioned in a perfect defensive formation around the colony world, their weapons powered but not targeted yet. The second thing I saw was Officer Krex Thulian's ship, the Iron Fang, floating dead in space about 10,000 kilometers from the planet's surface. No life signs, no power, no nothing. Captain, my scanner operator, a 3-eyed Altarian named Koiti, reported in a voice that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. I'm detecting debris patterns consistent with internal explosion. The ship was destroyed from within. Survivors? Negative, Captain. However, I am detecting one escape pod that launched approximately 4 hours ago. It appears to have landed on the planet's surface. I was starting to get a very bad feeling about this. The lead human vessel. The main screen shifted to show the bridge of an Earth Defense Force heavy cruiser. The human commander was a stern-looking woman with steel-grey hair and eyes that could freeze plasma. According to her uniform insignia, this was Admiral Patricia Kane, one of the humans' most decorated military leaders. Captain Velthorpe, Admiral Kane said without preamble. You're here about the Thulian incident. Yes, Admiral. I understand there was an unfortunate misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Kane's voice could have cut through reinforced hull plating. Officer Thulian murdered an 8-year-old child and attempted to kill his mother. In human legal terms, that's not a misunderstanding. That's grounds for war. The way she said it, so calm and matter-of-fact, sent chills down my spine. Humans had this terrifying ability to discuss the most violent subjects with the same tone others used to order lunch. Admiral, I assure you that the Galactic Council will conduct a full investigation. The investigation is over, Kane interrupted. We have security footage, witness testimony and forensic evidence. Officer Thulian is guilty of murder. The only question now is whether the Council will deliver justice, or whether we'll have to do it ourselves. That's when Pip, bless his nervous little heart, chose to pipe up from his station. Captain, I'm receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It's from the human colony. Put it through. Mayor Santos appeared on the secondary screen, but she looked different now. Gone was the grieving mother seeking help. In her place stood someone harder, colder, with eyes that promised retribution. Captain Velthorpe, I wanted to inform you that Officer Thulian has been taken into custody by our security forces. You captured him? I asked, though I was pretty sure I already knew the answer. In a manner of speaking, Santos replied with a smile that would have made a vegan ice shark nervous. He attempted to flee the planet in his escape pod after his ship suffered an unfortunate malfunction. Our people intercepted him before he could reach orbit. What kind of malfunction? Though again, I was fairly certain I didn't want to know. Someone placed an explosive device in his ship's reactor core. We have security footage of the perpetrator. Santos paused, her smile growing wider. It was Sarah Webb, the mother of the child he murdered. My heart stopped beating entirely. The woman who was in your medical facility was being the operative term. She discharged herself about 6 hours ago. Turns out humans are remarkably resilient when properly motivated. Admiral Kane's voice cut through my stunned silence. Captain, I suggest you beam down to the planet immediately. The colonial government has requested that a Galactic Council representative witness their handling of this matter. Witness what exactly? Justice, both women said simultaneously. And that's how I found myself in a shuttle, descending toward a human colony world, with absolutely no idea what I was about to walk into. My pilot, a young Zelthari named Rex, kept muttering prayers to ancient stellar deities under his breath. Captain, he said as we entered the atmosphere, are you sure about this? Humans are, well, they're humans. What's that supposed to mean? My cousin served on a joint exploration mission with them once. He said they have this thing called proportional response. Except their idea of proportional usually involves enough firepower to crack a moon in half. Great, just great. We landed at the colony's spaceport, which was surprisingly modern for a frontier settlement. Clean landing pads, proper atmospheric processors, and what looked like a statue of some human historical figure in the center plaza. Everything seemed perfectly normal, except for the small detail that half the colonists were carrying weapons that could punch holes in starship armor. Mayor Santos met us at the landing pad, flanked by two humans in security uniforms. One was a large man with scars covering his arms and the kind of smile that suggested he enjoyed his work a little too much. The other was a woman who looked like she could arm wrestle a Corvan battle tank and win. Captain Velthok, Santos said, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. I shook her hand, trying not to wince as her grip threatened to crush my fingers. Humans and their ridiculous bone density. Where is Officer Thulian? I asked. He's being held in our detention facility, Santos replied. However, there's something you need to see first. She led us through the colony's main street, and I have to admit it was impressive. Clean buildings, well-maintained infrastructure, and happy children playing in designated areas. It would have been peaceful if not for the fact that every adult we passed was armed to the teeth. Expecting trouble? I asked. Captain, Santos said with that same chilling smile, when humans are involved, it's always wise to expect trouble. We stopped in front of a modest building marked Community Center. Inside, about 50 colonists had gathered in what looked like a makeshift courtroom. At the front of the room sat 3 humans behind a table, apparently serving as judges, and in the center was a cage containing one very nervous-looking Drakmori. Officer Krex Thulian was exactly what you'd expect from his species. 2.5 meters of scaled muscle, 4 arms, razor-sharp claws, and a face that looked like it had been designed by a committee of nightmares. Under normal circumstances, he would have been the most intimidating creature in the room. These were not normal circumstances. The humans had set up their makeshift court with meticulous attention to detail. Witness stand, evidence table, even what appeared to be a jury box filled with 12 colonists. It would have been almost quaint if not for the fact that half the jurors were carrying weapons that violated several interstellar treaties. Ladies and gentlemen, announced the lead judge, an elderly human woman with white hair and grandmother-like demeanor, court is now in session. We are here to determine the fate of Officer Krex Thulian, who stands accused of the murder of Marcus Webb and the attempted murder of Sarah Webb. Thulian rattled his cage bars. This is illegal. I demand to be transferred to Galactic Council custody. The grandmother judge looked at him with the kind of expression usually reserved for insects found in food. Sir, you are currently on human colonial territory. As per the Colonial Charter of 2387, we have full jurisdiction over crimes committed within our borders. I am a duly appointed officer of the Galactic Council. You was an officer, called out a voice from the crowd. Now you're just a child killer. The crowd murmured agreement, and I noticed several hands moving closer to weapons. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Order. The judge called, though she didn't seem particularly concerned about maintaining it. Now then, let's hear from our first witness. A young human man stood up from the gallery. My name is Jake Morrison. I was working at my shop when I heard the commotion in the square. I saw the whole thing. Please describe what you witnessed. Morrison's face hardened. Officer Thulian approached a group of kids who were playing some kind of tag game. They were being loud, sure, but they weren't hurting anybody. He started shouting at them in Galactic Standard, which none of the kids speak fluently. What happened next? Little Marcus, he was trying to understand what the officer wanted. He kept saying sorry in English and backing away. But Thulian, he got angrier, started waving that baton of his around. Morrison's voice cracked slightly. Marcus, he was scared. He turned to run back to his mum, who was shopping at the fruit stand. That's when Thulian hit him. The silence in the room was deafening. Even Thulian had stopped rattling his cage. The sound, Morrison continued, I'll never forget the sound. Like a melon being dropped on concrete. Marcus just dropped. Didn't move, didn't cry, just gone. Several humans in the audience were openly weeping now. Others looked like they were restraining themselves from tearing Thulian limb from limb. And then Sarah Webb, Marcus's mum, she screamed and ran to her boy. She tried to help him, but he was already. Morrison wiped his eyes. Thulian yelled at her to stay back, said she was interfering with official business. When she didn't stop trying to help her dead son, he hit her too. The judge nodded grimly. Thank you, Mr. Morrison. You may be seated. One by one, witnesses took the stand. Each told the same story with minor variations, but the core facts never changed. Thulian had killed a child for being loud and tried to kill the child's mother for grieving. When it came time for Thulian to speak in his own defense, he made what might have been the worst decision of his considerably shortened life. The juvenile was being disruptive, he said, with the kind of arrogance that could power a small star. When given lawful orders to disperse, he failed to comply. Standard protocol required escalation to physical enforcement. The room erupted. Humans were shouting, weapons were being drawn, and I was pretty sure I saw someone loading what looked like a plasma rocket launcher. Furthermore, Thulian continued, apparently oblivious to the fact that he was digging his own grave. The female's interference with official duties warranted corrective action. I acted within the full scope of my authority as granted by the Galactic Council. That's when I realized something that should have been obvious from the start. Officer Krex Thulian wasn't just a murderer, he was an idiot. The lead judge called for order, but her heart clearly wasn't in it. When the crowd finally quieted down, she looked at Thulian with an expression that could have frozen a star. Mr. Thulian, this court finds you guilty of murder in the first degree and attempted murder. Do you have any final words before sentencing? Thulian drew himself up to his full height. I demand transfer to Galactic Council custody for proper trial under interstellar law. Wrong answer. The judge smiled, the same kind of smile a predator gives its prey. Mr. Thulian, by the authority vested in me by the Colonial Charter and the laws of humanity, I sentence you to death. The crowd cheered. Thulian's face went pale green. However, the judge continued, raising her voice above the celebration. The method of execution will be determined by the victim's family, as is our custom. That's when the courtroom doors opened and Sarah Webb walked in. I had seen her holographic image during the distress call, but seeing her in person was something else entirely. She was small by human standards, maybe 5.5 feet tall, with brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail. Her left arm was in a sling, and there were bandages visible under her shirt where Thulian's baton had struck her. But her eyes burned with the kind of fury that could ignite atmospheres. Mrs. Webb, the judge said gently, the court recognizes your right to determine the method of justice for your son's killer. Sarah Webb walked slowly to the front of the room, her gaze never leaving Thulian. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, controlled, but somehow more terrifying than any scream. Your Honor, I choose trial by combat. The room went silent. Even I, with my limited knowledge of human customs, knew what that meant. Thulian laughed, actually laughed. Trial by combat. You're barely recovered from your injuries. I am a trained Drakmori warrior. This is suicide. Sarah Webb turned to look at him for the first time since entering the room. Her smile was small, sad, and absolutely terrifying. "Officer Thulian," she said softly, "you killed my baby boy. Do you really think I care about surviving this?" And that's when I finally understood what Commander Grix had been trying to tell me. Humans weren't dangerous because they were strong or smart or technologically advanced. They were dangerous because when you threatened what they loved, they stopped caring about consequences. The trial by combat was scheduled for the next morning. As the crowd dispersed, I found myself face to face with Mayor Santos again. "Captain," she said, "I hope you'll stay to witness the proceedings. The Galactic Council should see how humans handle justice." "This is insane," I told her. "Sarah Webb can't possibly defeat a trained Drakmori warrior. You're sending her to die." Santos smiled that infuriating human smile again. "Captain, let me ask you something. What do you know about human children?" What? "Human children, Captain. What do you know about them?" I thought for a moment. "They're smaller versions of adult humans." "They're everything to us," Santos said quietly. "Our future, our hope, our genetic immortality. We would burn down galaxies for them. We would tear holes in reality itself to protect them." She stepped closer, and I caught a glimpse of something primal in her eyes. "Officer Thulian didn't just kill a child, Captain. He killed someone's entire universe. And tomorrow, that someone is going to show him exactly what that means." As I walked back to my shuttle that night, I sent a priority message to Commander Grix. Just 3 words: send more ships. Because something told me that win or lose, Sarah Webb's trial by combat was going to be the beginning of something much bigger than anyone expected. And I was right. The next morning arrived with all the subtlety of a supernova. I hadn't slept much, kept thinking about Sarah Webb's eyes and that terrifying calm in her voice. My crew was equally restless. Rex had spent the night researching human combat techniques, while Pip kept monitoring communications between the Earth Defense Force ships above us. Captain Blex reported from his station, "We're receiving encrypted transmissions from 17 different human colonies. Also, 3 Earth Defense Force battle groups have just entered the system." 17 colonies. That meant word was spreading through the human communication networks like wildfire. In my experience, when humans started talking to each other in large numbers, someone was about to have a very bad day. I made my way to the combat arena the colonists had prepared, a simple circle marked out in the town square, surrounded by bleachers that definitely hadn't been there yesterday. The construction speed was impressive, though I suppose when your entire population consists of engineers, farmers, and former military personnel, building things quickly becomes second nature. The crowd was bigger than I'd expected. Not just colonists, but humans who'd arrived on overnight transports from neighboring systems. The word really had gotten out. They filled every seat, stood along the perimeter, even perched on rooftops. All of them watching, waiting. The Admiral Kane materialized beside me in a shimmer of transporter light. "Captain Velthorpe, sleep well?" "About as well as anyone can when standing on the edge of an interstellar incident," I replied. "Good. That means you understand the gravity of the situation." Kane's expression was unreadable. "Tell me, what do you know about human military doctrine?" "Overwhelming force, technological superiority, and a disturbing tendency to blow things up." Kane actually smiled at that. "Close, but not quite right. Our primary doctrine is proportional response. Someone hits us, we hit back exactly as hard as necessary to stop them from hitting us again. And if someone kills a human child," her smile vanished, "then we hit back hard enough to make sure no one ever thinks about killing a human child again." Before I could ask what that meant, a horn sounded. The crowd fell silent as Judge Morrison, I'd learned her first name was Helen, stepped into the center of the arena. Citizens of New Terra Colony and guests from across human space, she announced, "We gather today to witness trial by combat between Sarah Webb, mother of the murdered Marcus Webb, and Crex Thulian, the accused." 2 gates opened on opposite sides of the arena. From the east gate came Thulian, still in his Galactic Council uniform, looking confident despite everything. He was an impressive sight, all muscle and scales and razor-sharp claws, a born predator. From the west gate came Sarah Webb. She wore simple clothing, dark pants, a sleeveless shirt that showed the bandages on her arm, and boots that looked like they'd seen some serious use. No armor, no visible weapons. She looked tiny compared to Thulian, fragile even. But there was something different about her now. The grief was still there, the pain, but it had been forged into something harder, something dangerous. The rules are simple, Judge Morrison continued. And combat ends when one participant yields or dies. No outside interference, no mercy. She paused, looking directly at Thulian. Officer Thulian, do you accept the terms of combat? I do, Thulian replied with a sneer. Though I question the wisdom of sending an injured female against a trained warrior. This will be over quickly. Mrs. Webb? Sarah nodded once. I accept. Then let combat begin. What happened next would haunt my dreams for cycles to come. Thulian charged immediately, forearms spread wide, claws extended. He was fast, faster than any non-predator species had a right to be. His battle cry echoed off the surrounding buildings as he closed the distance. Sarah Webb didn't move. She stood perfectly still as 3 meters of scaled death bore down on her, and I was certain I was about to witness a massacre. Even the crowd seemed to hold its breath. At the last possible second, Sarah stepped aside. Not a dodge, not a dive, just a simple sidestep. Thulian's momentum carried him past her, and as he stumbled, trying to stop, Sarah's hand moved to her boot. When it came back up, she was holding a knife. Not some fancy combat blade or high-tech weapon. Just a simple steel knife, the kind farmers used to clean fish. Thulian spun around, snarling, "You think a primitive blade can hurt me? My scales are tougher than your ship's hull." Sarah said nothing. She just watched him with those burning eyes. Thulian attacked again, this time more cautiously. He slashed with one arm while using the others for balance and defense. Sarah flowed around his strikes like water, never quite where his claws expected her to be. "Stand still and die with dignity," Thulian roared. That's when Sarah spoke for the first time since combat began. Her voice was quiet, conversational, like she was discussing the weather. "You know what Marcus said when you started yelling at him?" Thulian paused, confused by the apparent non sequitur. He said sorry. Over and over again. Sorry. He didn't understand what he'd done wrong, but he was sorry anyway. Sarah's grip on the knife shifted slightly. He was 8 years old, and his last word was an apology to the monster who killed him. Something in Thulian's expression changed. Maybe it was the realization that this wasn't going to be the easy victory he'd expected. Maybe it was the way Sarah moved, not like a grieving mother, but like something that had learned to hunt. Enough, he lunged again, putting all 4 arms into a coordinated attack pattern that should have been impossible to evade. Sarah didn't evade it. Instead, she stepped into the attack, inside Thulian's reach where his size became a disadvantage. The knife moved once, twice, 3 times, precise cuts, surgical in their accuracy. Thulian stumbled backward, dark blood flowing from wounds in his arms and torso. Not fatal cuts, but deep enough to matter. His confident sneer was gone, replaced by something approaching concern. "Impossible," he muttered. "You're just a human female." "Just a human female," Sarah repeated, and now there was something terrifying in her voice. Something that made my scales crawl. "You know what this just a human female did yesterday? While you were trying to escape," she began to circle him, knife held low and ready. "I downloaded the schematics for Drakmori security cruisers from the colonial database. Studied them while I was supposed to be unconscious in the medical bay. Did you know that your species has a design flaw in your reactor shielding?" Thulian's eyes widened. You destroyed my ship." I improvised an explosive device using medical supplies and maintenance equipment. Placed it personally while you were still gloating over murdering my son. Sarah's smile was the stuff of nightmares. Took me 6 hours to get close enough without your sensors detecting me. 6 hours crawling through maintenance ducts with 3 broken ribs and internal bleeding. The crowd was dead silent now. Even Admiral Kane looked impressed. But here's the thing about us just human females, Sarah continued, still circling. We don't give up. We don't stop. We certainly don't forgive creatures who murder our children. Thulian attacked again, desperation replacing strategy. Sarah met him head-on this time, and what followed was less a fight than a masterclass in applied violence. Every move Sarah made was economical, precise, designed to cause maximum damage with minimum effort. She targeted nerve clusters, joints, the spaces between scales where Thulian's natural armor was weakest. The knife seemed to find every vulnerability his species possessed. Within minutes, Thulian was bleeding from dozens of wounds, none individually fatal, but together they were sapping his strength, his speed, his ability to fight effectively. Yield, he gasped, stumbling backward. I yield. Sarah stopped moving. What did you say? I yield. I surrender. The combat is over. Sarah tilted her head, considering. Did Marcus get a chance to yield? Did you give my 8-year-old son the opportunity to surrender before you caved in his skull? Thulian's face went pale. Please, I was following protocol. Protocol. Sarah's voice could have frozen hydrogen. Your protocol for dealing with loud children involves murder. She stepped closer, and Thulian scrambled backward until he hit the arena wall. Here's my protocol for dealing with child killers. What happened next was swift, brutal, and absolutely final. Sarah moved like lightning, and suddenly Thulian was no longer a threat to anyone, anywhere, ever again. The crowd erupted in cheers, but Sarah didn't acknowledge them. She simply walked to the center of the arena, holding something in her hands, something round and purple and unmistakably Drachmori. Judge Morrison raised her voice above the celebration. Justice has been served. Let the record show that Krex Thulian, murderer of children, has paid the price for his crimes. Sarah walked to where I stood with Admiral Kane and the other observers. Without a word, she placed Thulian's head at my feet. Captain Vel Thork, she said quietly, please take this to the Galactic Council. Tell them what happens when someone kills a human child. I stared down at the severed head, then back at Sarah Webb. This small, injured woman who had just single-handedly dismantled a trained Drachmori warrior. Mrs. Webb, I managed, I'm sorry for your loss. She nodded once. Thank you, Captain. But my loss is nothing compared to what Officer Thulian's superiors are about to experience. What do you mean? Admiral Kane stepped forward. Captain, you asked me earlier about human military doctrine. Proportional response. Yes? Officer Thulian wasn't acting alone. Our intelligence indicates he was part of a Drachmori supremacist movement within the Galactic Council's security forces. They've been targeting human colonies for months, testing our responses. My blood turned to ice. How many colonies? 17 incidents in the past year. Escalating violence, always against civilians, always with the excuse of maintaining order. Kane's expression was granite. We've been patient, Captain. We've filed complaints, followed proper channels, trusted in Galactic Council justice. And now? Sarah Webb answered before Kane could. Now we're done being patient. The implications hit me like a meteor strike. 17 colonies, thousands of humans who now knew that the Galactic Council's security forces were targeting their families. The communication networks, the arriving ships, the carefully orchestrated trial. This wasn't about justice for one murdered child, I realized. This was a declaration of war. Not war, Admiral Kane corrected. Justice. But justice on a scale the galaxy has never seen. Sarah bent down and picked up Thulian's head by what remained of his head crest. Captain, when you deliver this to the Council, make sure you include our terms. Terms? Every member of Thulian's supremacist cell will surrender themselves for trial by combat. Every colonial governor who ignored our complaints will resign. Every security protocol that treats humans as second-class citizens will be abolished. She handed me the grisly trophy, and I nearly dropped it. The weight was wrong somehow, as if it carried more than just physical mass. "And if the council refuses?" I asked, though I was pretty sure I already knew. Sarah Webb smiled that terrible, beautiful, absolutely terrifying smile. "Then we'll come collect the heads ourselves." Admiral Kane activated her communicator. "All units, this is Admiral Kane. Execute Operation Reckoning." Above us, the sky lit up as dozens of human warships dropped out of hyperspace. Not just Earth Defense Force vessels, but colonial militia ships, converted freighters, even what looked like armed pleasure craft. Every human faction in this sector of the galaxy, united in purpose. "Captain," Kane said, "I suggest you return to your ship immediately. In approximately 1 hour, we're going to begin systematically dismantling every Galactic Council facility within 50 light years that has harbored anti-human elements." "You can't do that. It's an act of war." "No, Captain, it's proportional response. Someone killed our children, so we're going to kill everyone responsible. Someone ignored our pleas for justice, so we're going to replace them with people who won't." I clutched Thulian's head and ran for my shuttle. Behind me I could hear Sarah Webb addressing the crowd, her voice carrying across the square. "Citizens of New Terra Colony. Today we showed the galaxy what happens when you threaten our families. Tomorrow we show them what happens when you ignore our warnings." The crowd's roar followed me all the way to my ship. Rex was waiting at the shuttle, his face pale with terror. "Captain, the human ships, they're everywhere." "I know. Get us back to the Stellar Harmony immediately." "What about our mission?" I looked down at the severed head in my hands, then up at the growing fleet of human warships blotting out the stars. Our mission just became survival. The flight back to my ship took 10 minutes. 10 minutes of watching human vessels form attack formations around every Galactic Council facility in the system. 10 minutes of intercepted communications as colonial militias across dozens of worlds activated and began moving toward their targets. When we reached the Stellar Harmony, I immediately ordered all hands to battle stations and sent an emergency transmission to Galactic Command. "This is Captain Zara Velthork of the patrol cruiser Stellar Harmony," I broadcast. "Code Black has been upgraded to Code Omega. The humans are mobilizing for large-scale military action." I repeat, Code Omega. This is not a drill. The response came back within minutes from Commander Grix himself. "Captain, what is your status?" "Commander, Officer Krex Thulian is dead. Executed by human colonial authorities after a trial by combat. The victim's mother personally delivered the killing blow. Static filled the channel for several seconds. "Commander? Are you there?" "Captain, please tell me you're joking." "I wish I was, sir. It gets worse. The humans are claiming this was part of a larger pattern of anti-human violence by Drekmori supremacists within our security forces. They're demanding surrenders, resignations and policy changes. And if we refuse..." I looked out my view screen at the assembled human fleet, hundreds of ships, with more arriving every hour. "They're going to take what they want by force." Another long pause. "Captain, return to base immediately. Bring whatever evidence you have." I glanced down at Thulian's head, still clutched in my hands. "Roger that, Commander. Evidence acquired." As we prepared to jump to hyperspace, my communications officer picked up one final transmission from the planet's surface. Sarah Webb, speaking directly to the human fleet above. "This is Sarah Webb, mother of Marcus Webb, murdered by Galactic Council forces. To every human ship in this system, every human colony listening to this broadcast, every human citizen across the galaxy, my son's death has been avenged, but our work is not finished." Her voice carried the authority of absolute conviction. "For too long we have been patient. For too long we have trusted others to protect our families. For too long we have accepted that our children are expendable in the name of galactic peace. The fleet above us began to move, forming up into attack formations. No more. But today we send a message that will echo across every star system, every space station, every government building in known space. If you threaten our families, if you harm our children, if you think humans are weak because we prefer peace to war. Sarah Webb's final words followed us into hyperspace. We will drop your head at the Council's feet. 6 months later, the Galactic Council had new leadership, new policies, and a very healthy respect for human diplomatic preferences. The Drakmori supremacist movement ceased to exist, its members having made the tactical error of accepting Sarah Webb's challenges to trial by combat. As for me, well, I got promoted to Admiral and put in charge of human relations. My first official act was to establish new protocols for dealing with human colonies, be polite, be respectful, and under no circumstances should anyone ever harm a human child. Because as Sarah Webb proved on that day in New Terra Colony, humans might prefer peace, but they're absolutely exceptional at war. And they never, ever forget.